How do you make a custom slider in SwiftUI? It's actually a trick question because the only way you can do it is either make your own slider from scratch, or you need to integrate UIKit and wrap up a UI slider that's going to allow you to customize the track height as well as a thumbnail image. This is one of those things that just does not have the customization. Hey, what's up? My name is Paul Solt. Welcome back to this tutorial series. We're learning how to build this payment calculator, and it has two big custom controls that we're going to have to implement. So in this video, we're going to learn all about creating this custom control to allow us to do the slider. And then we'll learn in the next video how to make this custom control for selecting the different loan terms and APR values. So I've got this UI mockup that we're working off of, and we're going to programmatically create this icon just to show you what's possible with core graphics and the image-based API. So we'll build a little image just for fun, and we are going to customize the track height, which is this. So that's the one thing that we cannot customize in SwiftUI. We can't customize the track height, and we cannot customize the thumbnail image. It is possible to use the appearance APIs to customize this thumbnail image, but you can't do the track height in the same code. So it's like, okay, why bother? And so what I'm going to show you is the way to do it using UIViewRepresentable and a custom subclass of the UISlider. This is how we can get access to that track height. So that will allow us to basically build a slider. And I've got three different sort of variants of this. So you can have a small track height, you can have no image, and you can have a different color. We could have a totally different image. So if we went down here, we could create one more fun looking one here, and we could just pass in a new image and system name. And I think this actually takes a UIImage, but that's okay. We'll fix that in a second. Let's do the trash can and .fill. Let's just double check that that exists. Trash .fill. Of course, doing a live demo, it doesn't always work. We might have to template it. Let's try. Oh, my bad. We had it right. I added a new parameter here to hide the thumbnail. Okay, so now we have a trash can image. So that's how we can customize it. That's how we can sort of play around with this. All these sliders are all working together because they're all using the same amount. So let's dive into what this code is going to look like and build it up piece by piece so that you can understand how this is going to work. Okay, so let's dive back into this custom slider project, and I'll have all of this source code. So if you want to download any of this code, including the final code that I was just demoing, you can get access to all of that using this link right here. Okay, so just enter your email address and you can download all of that code, and that's in the link down below. Let's dive right in. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to work out of one file just to get started, and then I'll start extracting things as we need. So I'm going to import UIKit, and we are going to subclass the UISlider class, and that has a property or a function that we can override called trackRec that allows us to change the dimensions of that slider, because the default one is going to be pretty tight. So let's call this ChunkySlider, and we'll subclass UISlider. And this basically allows us to have a way to pass in a height, and we'll initially set this to maybe 2. It's going to be a double, and then we're going to do our track. If you just start typing trackRec, you'll see this method appear. This says it returns the drawing rectangle for the slider's track down here. And this is just going to be a rectangle. And we're going to use the current implementation and then just override the height. So we can do that by creating a new variable rectangle. And this will be based on super.trackRect for bounds. We pass in the bounds that is passed in here. We get a value. And then all we need to do is modify the rec.size. And in this case, we want the height. So we can adjust it to the height that we're passing in. And then we are going to return the rectangle that has now been modified. Okay. So that is our custom chunky slider. And now we can use this in SwiftUI by wrapping it up in a UIViewRepresentable. So let's go ahead and look at how that's going to work. So we're going to create a struct, and this is going to be a custom slider. And this will be a UIViewRepresentable. And in doing this, there's going to be some properties or functions that we have to implement to conform to the protocol. And apparently it doesn't want to insert any of those automatically, so we're going to type them ourselves. So there's going to be a make coordinator method. There's going to be a make UI view. And then there's going to be an update UI view. So we'll type those three. And then in terms of what we're making, we're going to be making a UI slider. And let's go ahead and put that right down here. Okay. And when I say UI slider, I actually mean a chunky slider. Okay, so now we're going to have some warnings. Let's focus on one at a time. So the first thing we need to do is create that slider. And we can just use the frame.0 to create a starting point. And next, we're going to need some information. So we want to customize the height. We want to customize the range. We want to customize the value to whatever is being sort of passed in. And this means we need to expose some properties for configuring all of this. So in our custom slider, let's go ahead and create a binding. This is going to allow us to have the value. We'll just make it a double type. And then we are going to create a range. And this will be a closed range that will allow us to select some double values of the start and the end range of our slider. And then we are going to, actually, before we even, let's take a step back. Let's just actually see if we can return this slider so that we can just start building this up piece by piece. And then this actually, I don't think has to do anything. And it's going to be a starting point. Oh, I don't know why I inserted this. Okay. I feel like I run into these issues a lot with SwiftUI where we'll insert sometimes an incorrect parameter, and maybe it made sense. I don't know why the autocomplete suggested that. Let's dive into this and see if that. So we've got make view. I don't know why it returned some view. So for whatever reason, it was auto completing, or when I did that sort of fix it, or not, it wasn't even the fix it. It was just the, let's look at that again. If we do make UI view, it can infer the context here. But because I didn't have the alias, so it initially, so let's start this over, because I'm probably doing this wrong. So there needs to be a type, and the type here is going to be a ChunkySlider. Okay, so if we do that, it will automatically infer this, but without that, it doesn't know what to do. And so we can then paste in this stuff, and it's going to be automatically like set up to do what we want to do. So we get essentially the same type of thing, but that way you get the fix it. So I guess I ignored this one because I wanted to get right to the methods without that. But then it inserts some property. So if you don't have the type alias and you start typing make coordinator, that one's fine. Make UI view. This one, for whatever reason, it says some UI view because it doesn't know the type yet. This has burned me a lot. So this is just like one of those paper cuts that you can get with SwiftUI. So there is a benefit of doing, I guess, the type alias, setting the view type, and then implementing the methods. So let's go ahead and uncomment this stuff. Now that we've got that squared away, and we should be able to throw this in here. And this will allow us to start testing how this is going to work. Okay, so if I want to customize the track height, we need to pipe that through. So var height, and let's call it track height so it's more specific. There's going to be a double or CG float. Set this equal to, looks like it's maybe set to 2 by default. And then we can pass this in to our ChunkySlider. So our ChunkySlider exposes the height is equal to the track height. So doing that, we're going to have a default value. We can set the track height now down at the bottom, and we can do 1. Let's create a couple of these so you can sort of see what this is going to do. Let's do 10. Let's do 8 or 6. And so here you can start to see that we're customizing that height value. None of these are connected to anything yet, so we still need to hook up the plumbing, but that's an example of doing these custom heights. So out of the gate, we now have the ability to customize the track height. Now, one of the things that we're going to have to do is do some plumbing. And setting up the slider. So let's work on getting the value set. To do that, we're going to set up this binding. So the binding is going to be a double variable, and we want to pass in something that's going to allow us, let's make this the first parameter, and this is going to be our value, and this will be loan amount. Okay, and then let's go ahead and create a state parameter for this loan amount. And this is going to be a double, and let's set this initially to our 21,900. And then we should see this. Okay, it's not going to update because we still don't have all of the plumbing hooked up, but now we have an amount associated with it. The next thing that we have to do is trigger UI updates when the value changes and propagate that to SwiftUI. And we're going to have to do that with the coordinator. So we have a method here to make the coordinator, but we don't actually have a coordinator yet. And that means we'll have to create another class. And we can do a inner class here. Not sure where I want to do it. Maybe after the variables. and we're going to call this class coordinator. And this is one of those kind of like weird things that you have to do with UIViewRepresentable. Let's see if we can pull open the documentation for that. No? Okay. So this documentation, okay, that, I mean, documentation on this is sparse. So what we need is we need some way to interface with this UI slider if we jump to definition. So if we do a command click, let me make sure we're key casting. So UISlider has a value, which is a float, and we want to get access to that. We also have, actually, this is pretty helpful because we can see all these different properties that we can customize. All these properties that do not hardly exist on the SwiftUI slider, which is a little disappointing, but I think Apple's trying to prevent people from doing super custom UIs. So we're going to create this coordinator object, and it needs to have a reference. It's going to sort of be this glue code. I'm surprised the make coordinator method doesn't talk about like how to use this. That's what I find a little frustrating. But we'll work through it. So this is going to have a parent property, and it's going to take this custom slider, and it's going to hold on to this reference to the object that we're going to pass in. Self.parent is going to equal the parent. And then the other thing that we're going to need to do is there's that value changed on the slider itself, which is an Objective-C method that we need to hook into. And so we're going to expose an Objective-C function, and it's going to be called value changed. And this is going to have a sender, which is going to be a UISlider. Okay, and then parent.value. Now, in this case, what we're doing is we're going to be converting from the sender, which is a UISlider value, into our value. So we're basically taking the value that's intrinsic to this UISlider, and we're saying grab that value, convert it to a double since we're exposing the double type for our value, and set that on parent.value. So parent.value is this, which is a binding. Now, this binding is going to be connected down at the bottom to this, whatever we pass in via the binding here. So we're passing in loan amount. So ultimately, this value gets piped into here, which then gets piped into the UISlider's value through this method. So that's going to be our coordinator, and we need to create a coordinator and return it. So we're going to say return coordinator. And then it's going to be self that we're passing in. So we have an inner self here is a reference to this custom slider. So we have an inner class here. This is a reference type that is being sort of this glue inside of a struct class, which is a value type. And so the object type has a reference to the value type, which is the SwiftUI slider. And then when we go ahead and update the UI, this is where we can make sure the value is getting updated as the value changes. So there's, let's see if anything happens. Nothing happens yet. For all of these to be in sync, we should be seeing, if we just Oh, we forgot one piece of the puzzle, and that is when we are actually making the UI view, we need to set up the value chain. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to say slider.addTarget. We're going to do the context. So here we are given the context, and the context has access to this coordinator. So now that's our reference type that we're holding on to. And then we can pass it the selector, which is going to be $selector. And we pass in an Objective-C method that's going to be the coordinator.valueChanged method. And then for the control event, we want this on value change. So value change is anytime this UI slider is moving, we're going to send this update event. And let's just verify that it works by printing value. Now let's see if we see anything. So right now we are seeing that it is printing out value on the previews. You have the option down here at the bottom to switch between executable and previews. Previews will show you print statements in your previews, which is super helpful. Okay, but we don't have that two-way relationship set up. So the last piece of the puzzle here is now if the view needs to be updated so that it's in sync, if we do this correctly, these two sliders should start sliding because they're all referencing the same binding. And so we need to now send the message in the reverse direction to the UI view. The UI view is a slider. It's our ChunkySlider. Then we're going to set that value equal to the current value that is coming in from the custom slider. Boom. Look at that. That's pretty cool. So the information was there. It just wasn't triggering the UI because we saw it print out, but it wasn't triggering those UI updates. So that is how we can customize the track bar. We now have the data. We also need to customize what is our range going to be. You can see the default range here is going to be 0 all the way at the end up to 1. So if we want to customize that, that's where we need to start working on a closed range. So let's pass in a closed range parameter. And then here, so we've got the height done. For our range, we're going to say slider.min value, and this will allow us to set the minimum value is equal to a float of the range dot lower bounds. And we can do the same for the minimum value of the range dot upper bound. So doing this piece now allows us to pass in a range, and we made this the second parameter. So when we're calling it range, and then it is going to be, let's go 0 ... to 500,000. So we can use an underscore here, and that'll give us a range. And then if that updates, if we type this correctly, we should now be able to move it, but it is not working. The other piece of the puzzle is I did not set the initial value equal to the float of the current value. Oh, typo, minimum value and minimum value. This should be maximum value. Okay, so doing that, we now have a value. So before it wasn't able to be moved because the minimum was the same value and the max was probably 0, and so it just didn't compute. So now you can see that our range is now updating. All of them are in sync. So we have a custom height. The next piece of the puzzle, now that we have this stuff hooked up, is to customize the thumbnail. So to do that, there is another method here. So we've got the value. And that is, let's see, how do I want to do this? We're going to pass in, to make this reusable, we're going to pass in an image, and this is going to be our thumb image. Let's see. Since we're in Swift land, let's pass in an image rather than a UI image, I think is kind of where I want to go. We'll make this optional. So if it's nil equals default thumbnail image, and then let's create one more property here, and this is going to be hide thumb image. This is a bool. We'll set this default to false. So this will give us another configuration. Let's go ahead and implement the image. So if let thumb image, then we are going to set that on the slider dot, and then we're going to look for current thumb image. It looks like we actually have a large content image as well. And those are the other two like maximum, minimum range images. So those are other things that you could expose if you wanted to. And we're going to set this equal to whatever image is passed in. So let's grab that thumb image that we just unwrapped, and that should allow us to set this, but this is a UI image. So maybe we do need, oh, and this is a get only property. So that is, this is actually, we jump to definition. Current thumb image is get only. And what we want to do is to set the image. There is a special method for setting the images. So it should be set image. Set thumbnail image is the method that we need to call because we need to set it for the state. So there's this control state property, which is why we need to do it this way versus this approach. So let's rewrite that. Set thumb image, and we're going to pass in the image that we want to use. I'm actually not sure if we can do it this way. In the control state, we're going to do normal. So it's going to be normal interaction with the thing. If you wanted to, you could customize how it appeared, if it was disabled or if it was selected or focused or highlighted. So you could have alternate images for each of those states. For simplicity, we're just going to go with the normal. And I'm going to, for simplicity, keep this a UI image. So let's go back up here and we're going to do UI image. And I accidentally inserted that. Okay, so doing those things, let's go ahead and rerun it. We should be able to now pass in an image if we want. Right now it's an optional value, and then hiding is also optional. So let's play around with creating one with a custom. Let's customize this last one. Really don't need these. All right, so there we can have a custom sort of icon and do whatever you want. We're going to have to make our own icon, and then we want to be able to hide it potentially. So if you want to hide it, and we can implement hiding with slider tint color. So if hide thumb image, let's just go ahead and say slider dot thumb tint color is equal to .clear. And so now we have not only the ability to do a clear thumbnail, a custom thumbnail, and then just regular thumbnails. So we have full control over this. And if we wanted to, we could then set the tint color to red. And so doing this, now we have the ability to stylize these different ones. Like we might even just, instead of making it hide thumbnail, it might just be like thumbnail tint color that we expose. Could be another option for you to sort of customize this a little bit further. Now for what we need is we need this custom image ability. And to do that, we're going to have to make a little helper function that's going to allow us to create a custom image. Okay. All right, so this is going to be some core graphic stuff. I'm just going to do it again in here, and then we'll clean up stuff once we have this working. So let's create a structure, and we'll just call it image helper. And then I'm just going to make a static function in here. And this is going to be called create thumbnail. This is going to be just specialized to what we want to do. So I'm going to do a CG size and then a tint color, UI color. And this is going to give us a UI image. And we're going to create an image. So at its most basic level, we could do something like this, return result. Now, what we really want to do is create that image. So this is kind of the contract that we need to use in order to use it down here. So let's go ahead. That's going to be our red one. Let's do a yellow one. And then our yellow one, we'll go ahead and create a thumbnail image. I'm going to use this image helper dot create thumbnail of size. We'll pick a CG size, width, height of, let's go with 30 by 30. And then the tint color is going to be, let's do .orange just to play with something. Okay, so right now it's creating an empty or blank image. So there's no visual associated. So that's another way to get like an empty one. I guess we could just provide an empty image rather than having but that's kind of like a hard to find API choice. So I probably wouldn't do it that way. I think having the exposure of hiding the thumbnail and just making that accessible makes a whole lot more sense. So with this, let's go ahead and do the math that we're going to need to do. And I'm just going to build this with circles. And we're going to use the UIImage circle.fill. So if we go over to SF symbols and we search for circle, you will see there's a lot of circle options. There is this circle.fill. It's not quite what we want. There is another one down lower that we could also leverage, but it doesn't match the design. So let's go back to what our design that we're trying to match is this style. And there is one somewhere down here that's like a circle within a circle. This one is similar. You see there's a lot of interesting shapes that we could leverage. I thought there was one more variety of that, but I'm not seeing it. We got this. That's not quite what we want. With circle.circle. Would it be circle.fill.circle? A lot of things to look at. So at the end of the day, we're going to start with a circle, and we could also use an ellipse, but I'm just going to show you how to use a circle.fill as a starting point for this algorithm. So let's create the thumb image, and we'll use the UIImage system name. And then we're going to do that circle.fill that we just saw in SF symbols. And the other thing that we're going to do is a with tint color. And this will give us a new image back. And we're going to go with the tint that is provided, which would be this one. And then we're going to do an inner dot. So this is going to be our dot image. And this is going to be equal to the same thing. We'll just reuse that thumb image. And we're just going to do with tint color dot white. So we're just trying to create the UI. And in order to do this, let me demonstrate what this is going to look like in terms of the computer graphics. So we're essentially creating a circle, and that's going to be what we want to render on the canvas. And we want to overlay another circle on top of it. So we basically want to do this, and we're going to make it 1/4 of the width. So it should be about maybe this big. We're going to make it about that big and center it in the middle. Now, what we have to understand is that the way drawing works, it's from the top left corner in Core Graphics. And so we also have to account for, if we want it in the center, most likely the first time you do this, you'll notice that the graphic gets overlaid in the wrong spot. And that's because we have to take into account the dimensions of this and shift it over by half of the diameter here, or just the radius of this circle. So half of the length or width is what we have to adjust our placement of. So that's what we're going to be doing, is we're going to be essentially figuring out what is the size of the rectangle that we want to render the image in. And so we're going to have the large image rendered as is in the size that we provide. And then we're going to have the smaller one inset in a smaller rectangle that we then position in the very center. So that's how we're going to do this effect. Let's build that rectangle. So the first rectangle, I didn't want to pass a rectangle in because I felt like that was a little bit annoying at the call site. So we're just going to default the origin to be 0, 0. So it's that top left corner that we were just looking at in the sketch diagram that I was going over. And then the width, we're going to pass in size.width, and then we're going to pass in size.height. So that's going to allow us to change how big this is getting. And then we're going to calculate the dot length. And this is going to be that size.width. And I'm just going to use one of the edges. I'm assuming this is square. And we're dividing by 4. And then we're going to have an inset, which is going to be equal to the dot length. And let's just start with that, and I'll come back to this. Okay. And so now what we want is an inner rectangle, and this is going to be using that information. So we have to figure out, where is this rectangle going to be in relation to our 0, 0 origin, which is up at the top. So if we look, this is 0, 0 over here at the top in our coordinate system. So we need to inset by half of, if we look at this, half of the width here is going to be how far we want to inset. So let's calculate this. So inner rect is going to equal, and then we're going to do the CG rect. Now, instead of doing 0 here for this XY width, we are going to do our inset distance, and right here. And then the same for our Y, and then our width here is going to be our dot length. And then our width is going to be our dot length. Okay. So that's our starting point. Next up, we are going to create a new thumbnail using the renderer, and we need to create a renderer. So let's create a renderer. And this is equal to a UI graphics. Now you have to be careful on typing this. I always mess this up, but it's image renderer is what we need. And we want to pass it a size of size. And then we are going to create a thumbnail using that renderer. So thumb is equal to renderer dot, and then we're looking for the image with actions. This will give us the graphics context. So we'll just call this context. And then in here, we do our draw operations. So all I need to do, since I'm using these images, is draw them. And there's a few different ways of drawing with different blend modes. I don't know what the default does. So we could take a look at the documentation. That one's draw at point. We want to draw in. So let's make sure we select the right one. Let's just go with this default one. And so this first thumbnail image is going to be our big image. So we want to render this circle in the full bounds of our rectangle, which is the extent of that image that we're passing in. So this will be our first rectangle that we created. And then the blend mode, we have a whole bunch of different options here. We just want normal blend mode, so that's going to be the normal colors, but you could do different alpha blending operations here, depending on different effects that you want to accomplish. And then in terms of alpha, we don't want this to be transparent at all, so we're going to do a 1.0, which is 0 to 1 range, and then we're good to go. And so now if we, instead of returning result, we return our thumb, and let's get rid of this because we're no longer using that. So I just got rid of that empty result property that we had. If your code now looks like this should give us something. And we don't see it yet. We are using it down here, right? We would expect it to be orange on this last track, and it's not there yet. Okay, let's see if we can get that dot image to draw. And we want to draw in the rectangle that we're going to provide, which is that inner rectangle, which is that smaller rectangle. We're going to do a normal blend operation and make it fully opaque. Okay, so what is going on here? Let's just take a look at the code and see if there's anything that's obvious. So I've got a rectangle at 0, 0, our size, width, and height that we're passing in. We are passing 30 and 30 down here at the bottom. And of course, I did not change this earlier. That's probably our problem. There we go. All right. So our image is working, and it has that effect that I talked about. So the effect where the image is here, and it almost looks like a Pokemon ball that's on an axis without some of the shading. Get rid of that breakpoint. And we're going to investigate the rendering. So I talked about having to fix the inset. The inset we actually have to offset by the dot length divided in 2. So however big we want this dot, we need to take half of it and shift this down to get it fully centered. And that's just how computer graphics works. So we need to, because we're always rendering from the top left corner, so we need to account for the dot length divided by 2. And so that should center us. And we see down here, it is now centered. So that's how we can create custom sliders. That's how we can create custom images. I'm going to clean this up a little bit. So what we have here, this is going to be a UIKit thing. So this is something that we can extract and just cut out of here. And so a trick in Xcode is we can just paste it. And now we have this image helper class. Next up, if we go back to the view, we made this custom ChunkySlider up top. We can cut this out, click over here, paste it. And now we have a new file called ChunkySlider. And then if we go back to our custom content view here, and we look up here, we've got our custom slider. Cut this out, click over here on the left, paste it in. We have our custom slider. Now it didn't import because I didn't have any SwiftUIs here, so I'm just gonna have to add that to make it so this compiles. We've got a comment here. And I think we're pretty much good to go. That should get us a starting point for the UI design. Cool. And I'll just go ahead and commit that. Okay. So that, if I did that correctly, just do some get all those changes together. Okay, so now we have a custom slider that we can use. We're just going to grab these files and bring them over to our other project. So I've got the other project right here, and we are just going to grab the chunky slider, the custom slider, and the image helper, and we're going to drag those over and then just plop them right in here. And we can create a new group. And we'll call this custom slider. Image helper doesn't necessarily need to go in there, but just to keep things organized, that's where we're going to leave it for right now. And now in our payment calculator app, so now that we're done with sort of playing around with our other project, we can switch out our slider. And we're going to do custom slider. And this will allow us to bind to the loan amount. We'll be able to give it the same range that the other one has. And we can set the tint color. And we should now have our custom slider. Now here, we have all these other new properties that we can customize, like the track heights. We can say 8, and we can say the thumb image. And we can use that image helper to create a thumbnail of CG size 30 by 30 with a tint color of, let's go yellow just for fun. Oh, yellow is hard. Orange. Okay, and we can change the tint color here to maybe yellow. That looks a little bit better. Okay, so that is our custom slider. It's now something that we can integrate, and we can now start working towards matching the style that we need to do for the rest of this component. Okay, so that's the first component. In the next video, let's go ahead and build out this card, and we'll have a placeholder for our next control, but we'll at least get the styling so that this UI can start coming together and looking a lot more presentable. Thanks for watching. Thanks for learning how to create a custom control. If you want any of this code, you can just hop on down to the link down below. You can download this code as well as the custom slider by itself. So that's this separate project. I've got all of those files together here. So we're in the payment calculator, but if you go into the custom slider, you'll get access to that project as well. And so you can just download those from the link down below. Thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful. I hope you learned how to work a little bit with sliders and learned how to create a custom version that can have a custom graphic, learned a little bit about image composition, how you can pass in your own image, as well as sort of hiding different images. All of these things are not possible with the default SwiftUI slider. So if you want to do something like this, you need to build a library of UI elements that you can leverage in your apps. You're going to have to use something like this custom slider. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video where we continue working on this application and get this piece looking a lot more polished. I'll see you later.